Well, so this is our last Monday evening get together on Zoom for a little while. So if you had any questions but were a little bit shy to ask them, now's your opportunity. It'd be lovely if we heard some other voices. Very happy for whoever wants to chip in to chip in. But please do feel free. We have the react button at the bottom of your screen, and there's the raise hands icon that you can use. If anybody has any questions, observations, something you'd like to talk about, or you'd like me to talk about, then feel free. Hilda, hello.
Hello. Okay, so I have a question about when we're noting sometimes the difference between like noting something, say a hindrance, if it's worry, and indulging in it or having aversion to the hindrance actually being there in the first place is a little bit unclear. So say I'm noting worry and then worry comes up again and I note it sort of, or am I actually kind of indulging it? And yeah, I don't know if that question makes sense, but something I've been reflecting on lately.
Yes. Whenever there's a reflection on meditative experience and it ends in a question mark, we can pretty much be sure that doubt is there too. Things aren't supposed to be a certain way. Again, it's this underlying comparison born of uncertainty. So, should something, is it correctly noting something when there's clarity? No, it could be muddy, it could be dull, it could be confused, it could be very difficult to even apply a label on something. That's just as legitimate as, you know, clarity and insight and, lucidity in noting things. If we take, it's a faith issue, because if we are confident in doing that, and we're not seeking the objects of meditation to be any particular way, but we're just content to note them as they appear, and to note the mind which does note them as it appears in with whatever quality that it possesses at that time. What happens is, over time, we start to be able to make these more nuanced assessments of what's actually going on. And so you can see clearly the difference between worry and then aversion to the worry.
Yeah.
And again, it's back to the same thing. I know it's so counterintuitive, and it tests our faith in what we're doing with doubt. It throws up the doubt in what we're doing, but it's the willingness to come back to the instruction and rest with the instruction and allow for things to be restless, irritable, frustrated, confused, dull, and recognizing we have this tendency to make this comparison and believe that it's all about clarity and tranquility and, pleasurable interest and fascination, and so we're making all these value judgments where we don't need to. And it's just learning that it's the actual value judgment itself which is the thing that's really getting in the way.
Yeah.
It's the comparison. It literally doesn't matter if it's difficult to tease out the details. You just come back to a oh, I'm not very good at explaining these things. A chunkier. You just note in bigger chunks. You just sort of say, well, the mind's dull at the moment, or the mind's confused. And this is the value again of using a journal and writing down. The journal isn't. It's really literally what happened and in what order. What can I remember about that past period of practice? And if you weren't able to untangle things in the meditation, perhaps you might be able to untangle them a little bit afterwards, just purely in terms of, well, what happened? What kinds of states arose? Oh, okay. So there was the worry, and then I was getting frustrated and annoyed because there was the aversion towards the worry. Oh, I see. And that aversion towards the worry is because I don't believe that worry should be part of the meditation. I think the meditation should be a worry-free zone. And so it's a view that's held. And you go, oh, okay, so no, but the instruction is to be content with whatever arises. So, okay. All right. So even in hindsight, I can see that, yeah, I've got a bit of a view going. And that just chips away at it, just chips away at it. And each time you come back to meditation, you've got a better idea of the kinds of patterns that emerge. And gradually over time, you're able to tease out these details and clearly see where it is that, yeah, where it is the aversion is, where it is the resistance lies, what is the objection to what's unfolding. Am I getting close to it, Hilda? Is this helping?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. No, it really recognize that because I think there's this idea that, we note something and then sometimes when you note something, then that particular hindrance might go away. So maybe there's like a hope that it will, okay, worry, 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 okay, then I'm rid of it, but it doesn't always work that way. And I guess then the concern is it just like an aversion to the worry then, or like a comparison, like you're saying? So actually, the doubt and the aversion to it, yeah. But yeah,
Yes,
makes sense.
we're not noting to get rid of things.
Yeah,
And one of the difficulties is like if we are quite lucid and there's clear comprehension of what a thing is and we note it really really clearly, we can fall into the trap of believing that it was the noting that got rid of it, but it isn't. It's just that because there's clear comprehension, we see that the thing noted is transient, and so because there's no ignoring, there isn't a tendency to recreate that thing in the attempt to get rid of it. So in the attempt to get rid of it, we recreate it and we haven't, it's there again.
yeah,
Whereas when there's just really clear mindfulness, clear noting, clear comprehension, it is seen that things are transient. And so we don't cling to it. And so we see that it doesn't persist. So, it's noting is not to get rid of things. That's it. Noting is to linger with things, to be able to linger with things with clear comprehension of what it is in order to see its true nature. That so because that's a very common, it's a very common and very understandable technique, that people employ, which is I'll note it to get rid of it and then I'll have a clear mind. But that's still actually coming from resistance,
yeah,
still
yeah.
coming from non-acceptance. Thanks, Hill.
Thank you.
Sally, hello.
Uh,
Sally? Yeah, you go. Sorry, that's it.
so, um, yeah, so I suppose what you've just said sort of fits in actually with what I was going to say, but I'm noticing the last few meditations that I feel like I'm getting quite hung up on remembering everything. And I don't know if anybody else is having this sort of going through their diary afterwards and feeling this like panic near the end of the meditation that I'm not going to remember everything. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, is that another kind of aversion because I'm thinking, oh, hang on a minute, oh, panic, panic, rather than resting, content to experience what's happening. The last bit the sort of third part of the meditation, I can feel myself getting anxious that I'm going to forget everything, so that I can write it down and then think about it all.
Okay, so there's a few things there, Sally. First of all, it is a very common experience with students, although we're not actually comparing, student to student, because again, that's just a different kind of comparison, isn't it? But it's the same thing. But yes, it can happen when people are doing walking meditation as well. That there's a point on the walking meditation route where they're going to stop and just retrospect and see if they can remember what had taken place in that short space of walking. And the entire journey of walking up until that point is just all, don't forget that, try not to forget, try to remember. So there isn't actually any noting going on. It's just this terrible attempt to succeed, to win, to get it right, and we associate being able to remember lots of things with success and doing it correctly and so forth. There's an expression that I've taken to using, which I really love, which is best loser wins. It's not about, because it's not actually about success and failure, but we are sort of like conditioned to think in those terms. And so it's the person who is best at losing that eventually triumphs. So in terms of meditation, it's the person who releases all concern about what they can remember and just goes, all right, well, maybe I'll reach the end of the meditation and I won't remember anything. Okay, that's what I'll write in my journal. At least you can write panic. At least you'll be able to remember that. And so it's a letting go. It's a letting go of the belief that I have to remember all this. It's not so that the retrospection, the wise reflection afterwards, is just one element of helping the whole process. And so it's relaxing, enjoying the meditation, enjoy noticing things, free from the burden of trying to hold on to it all, and then feeling free to be able to write down in your journal whatever it is that you can remember, rather than what you feel you should remember, just what literally you can remember, and being content with that. And again, it's a faith thing. It's like over time, there's more pattern recognition. That's pattern recognition in hindsight then helps the way that you enter into a future meditation and the things that you're able to perceive and note in those subsequent meditations. And so it just gradually, it leads to more clarity, more depth. We start seeing aspects of phenomena that we hadn't perceived before. So I think it's the contentment side. It's the relaxing side, content to note whatever arises to the best of your ability, to not be concerned about the loss of mindfulness, not to be concerned about what you can and can't remember, and then just jotting down a couple of minutes at the end of a meditation, just jotting down what you can remember and being content with that as well. Does that help?
Yeah, no, it does. It's just it was such a recent thing, like the last 3 or 4, I would say. I've just noticed the panic. I thought, where did that come from? Because I wasn't getting it before. It's like a new thing. It's strange.
There's lots of things lots of patterns that perhaps we don't normally see that gradually start to become evident through the practice, certain ways of responding. And certainly I think this kind of thing comes from uncertainty, because we don't know where the path leads. The light of mindfulness only really covers our next step or our next couple of steps, and the rest is in darkness. And so we're being asked to do something very unusual compared with what we as human beings normally do. We normally have a clear path ahead. We're able to project what kind of results we believe we should be able to get, and we head towards those. That's the way the world works, but it's not the way that meditation works. And so we have to have the faith to be content, to rest in the moment and content just to note what comes up and not necessarily having the full context yet. But gradually, it's not as if it's not explained to us. It's right there in the Pali Canon, and there have been teachers all through the ages that have explained it in exhaustive detail. And yet, when we actually practice, we are stepping into the unknown. It is our exploration. We're not trying to formulate. We're not trying to get it our meditative experience to reflect what we've read in the books. It has to be a free inquiry, a free exploration of experience. And we find that through doing that, we start to recognize what is being pointed out in the books and what teachers point out, because we're seeing it directly. That's the way around it's got to be.
Okay, thanks, Paul. That's helpful.
Thanks, Sally. Annie, hello.
Hi, can you hear me, Paul?
I can, yeah. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Yes.
Good.
Just to say that as long as I can remember, thinking has been my defense, really. Well, definitely. So, and when the resistance to let go of thought and language, and this thing about memory. I mean, basically, it's just a terror of mental loneliness, really, because everybody's coming from their own unique perception. And I remember when I was at school thinking, isn't it awful? I can't understand how anyone else's perception, and they can't understand mine. And all we've got is this language, which is concept, and I still battle with that. And the same as this noting, noticing, knowing. You're having to use these words, aren't you? I do know what clear sight is, Paul. I mean, not very often, but when there is a lucidity, it's a direct knowledge, isn't it? It's like pinching your arm. There isn't any dispute, but most of the time, it's. I'm absolutely terrified of memory loss. Yeah, I am absolutely terrified. I'm losing my language, definitely. And like, if you don't have language words, and you don't have memory, I mean, that's just like, God, it's just terrifying. Yeah, so given things like dementia is pretty kind of common, and like, how do you cope with that? Anyway, that's more like a life thing, isn't it? But it also is to do with meditation, because we need to be able to use all the time. You're noting and noticing and knowing. You're using these words, aren't you? And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I'm making sense or whether that's yeah.
Well, I appreciate your concern.
It's always the thing about not thinking, I can't imagine getting over this about being able, the resistance. My resistance would be, I can't let go of thought as long as I've been alive. It's like, you can't trust the body, that'll get sick, that'll die. Can't hang on to the body. And of course, really, I'm having to unlearn, aren't I, what I learned when I was about 2 or 5 or something, which no, we need to be in the body and let go of the thinking. So don't know how you do that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the resistance, isn't it? This, I can't let go of thinking. That's all I've got. The mind, no one can take the mind away from you, but we will lose the body. That's a given, And does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I mean, the first noble truth is, like, birth is suffering, old age, decay, and death is suffering. That means inevitably, like, loss of neuroplasticity, of the ability of neurons to make new connections. That inevitably leads to memory loss, dementia, and so forth. That's all part and unfortunately, it's all part and parcel of having been born in the first place. It's and it's the thought of it is very, very scary for people. obviously we can do things to help that neuroplasticity. I think meditation is a primary way of keeping the healthiness of the brain and all the connections that go on. Practicing lots of loving kindness meditation, which is a thinky meditation. It produces extraordinarily beneficial results, it seems. It tends towards the production of endorphins and serotonin and these kinds of things, which are at least going to help. But literally, we are all going to turn to dust, and I can't hide it any longer. We're all going to die. According to the Buddha's teaching, we are experts at dying. We have done it many, many times before. We just don't have that information to hand because we need to focus on the learning for this lifetime. We need to go through the dying process, the old age decay dying process, just to help convince us that being a human being is not the final, is not ultimately satisfactory, and that it is inevitable that everything arises, that its nature is to pass away again. From my perspective of having been through the insight training and now doing my best to develop the samatha training, the more I remain on this planet, the more convinced I am of how little I know, that life keeps on happening despite that recognition of how little I know about how things work, that following, trying to be kind, trying to be generous with my time, my energy, my resources, practicing loving kindness, cultivating loving attention in what I'm doing, trying to keep precepts, calming the mind, gaining insight, gaining wisdom into the true nature of reality, has led to this point where everything is unfolding and I don't know how everything holds together at all. But I just keep on cultivating loving attention to what I'm doing in real time and without making comparisons. As soon as I make a comparison, there's going to be suffering there. How am I doing in relation to this, then that, and so forth? When I'm not doing that, when I'm just cultivating loving attention in the moment, there is none of that at all. There's nothing I can do to stop the natural and ordinary process of decay of mind and body. It's inevitable. So I think it's about what we do now, the way we choose to act in body, speech, and mind, what we emphasize and what we de-emphasize, what we hold to be valuable. And if that is developing spiritual practices, then I think that will keep you in very good stead. But I think lots of loving kindness meditation, perhaps regular recollection of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, choosing really skillful objects of contemplation will help tremendously with faith. I feel that the universe is entirely benevolent, and it's only defiling qualities in the mind, wrong views, wrong perceptions, and so forth, that give a distorted image of what's actually unfolding. And so if there is just a willingness to follow the way and placing one's faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and practicing the way, then I think that the universe will construct itself in ways that are beneficial and relatively harmless for us. Depends what we've got in our karmic, I don't know what to call it, that, what potential we have for karmic resultants to unfold. But the more we follow the way, the more we give the opportunity for beneficial karmic resultants to accrue, and the less chance we give for negative karmic results to accrue. So, but yeah, we all face this, Annie, not just you.
Something, yeah. No, it's never been the death that's the problem. It's the the life that's the problem. But and the other thing, obviously, not obviously, but this thing about reality. Sorry, so you've got to keep on balancing this conventional with the other, haven't you? You've got to be in the world, which I don't want to be, and you've got to balance this act, haven't you? For example, if one was more confident, you wouldn't have to keep thinking of, because I find these materialists, very, very difficult. People like Dawkins, and I've got a couple of friends who are, fierce materialists, and they kind of, say, well, welcome to the real world, and I'm thinking, do you not call love or truth or pain real? They're real, aren't they? And so I'm doing a lot of talking about things that aren't meditation now, but you've got to balance your conventional life with your meditation life, haven't you? And as you say, they're two completely different ways of they're different forms of journeys, aren't they? They conflict, wouldn't you say?
No, not necessarily.
I think it's amazing you think the universe is benevolent, Paul. I mean, I can't, because I've always thought you really couldn't care less, could it? It just does what it does.
Of the two views, I know which one I prefer.
I think it's wonderful if you feel that. Yes.
Yeah. And I don't see a conventional life as being in conflict with a spiritual life. I see it all as a spiritual life. And so the things that occur in the conventional world are opportunities to practice the way, opportunities to develop generosity, kindness, but also equanimity and not minding, that of going with rather than objecting to, of finding out through relating to the world what kind of responses come up, and therefore knowing oneself even better. So I see these as spirit, just as much as part of the spiritual life as meditation. And I think that through the meditation, through a detailed examination of the transient nature of existence, tends towards a happiness which is not dependent on worldly things, which means there's far more contentment with little. That contentment with little means we're not cramming our lives with things to do, which means we're not rushing about, which means we can pay more mindful attention and cultivate loving attention to whatever we're doing, bringing it into the sphere of the spiritual life, rather than treating them as conflicting objectives. If somebody is treating them as conflicting objectives, then, well, they're going to be very unhappy, aren't they? But if there's this willingness to bring the Buddha's teaching, the way, into all aspects of life, so feeding the birds, putting the laundry in the washing machine, doing the washing up, whatever it is, treating it as an opportunity to practice the way, I think that can be extraordinarily fruitful.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think I probably
Thanks, Annie.
I think I just sort of care a lot about, probably too much about how other people view me. I think that's probably so trying to balance authenticity, which is really important to me, but also wanting to be on good terms. And I don't think you can carry people with you necessarily, can you? So
I literally have no idea what other people see when it comes.
There's a problem. Yeah. Thank you.
Going back to your earlier comment, yeah, I don't know how other people perceive me. I actually think it's none of my business.
Yeah.
Thanks, Annie. Joe, hello.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, you right?
Yeah. Um, could you help us understand right thought and right understanding and how that helps us with our meditation?
Um, can you give me any more?
Like, what's the difference between right thought and right understanding and how they support our meditation?
What's the difference between right thought and right understanding? Um, what do you mean by right Do you mean right view?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So in the Noble Eightfold Path, it begins with right view and right thought before then going on to um, right effort and the rest, right speech, right action, right speech, right effort. And then you have the meditative aspects, right mindfulness, right concentration. But they're all interlinked. But it begins with right view and right thought. So meaning that anyone anyone entering into Buddhist practice has already started correcting their view structure, haven't they? But by dint of sitting down to meditate, you are saying that there is value in meditation. And an awful lot of people see no value in meditation whatsoever. So it's there's already this process of reflection that's going on. There must be more to life than meets the eye. I am suffering and I want to do something about it. All that is right, getting one's views straightened, which is conditioning the kinds of thoughts that you have. The kind of thoughts that you have condition the kind of views that you hold. There's a direct relationship between perceptions, thoughts, and views. So you start to examine the Buddha's teaching, you start to read about it, you start to listen to lectures, you start to talk to teachers, you start to practice meditation. And there are all these kinds of interesting ideas like your actions have results, and these kinds of actions produce these kinds of results, these other kinds of actions produce these other kinds of results. Can you see that in your experience? So we have to get into meditation in order to start to become more mindful and be able to see this stuff. Where's that all that coming from? It's coming from the willingness to adapt one's views and bring them in line with, essentially, when we mean right, we mean it conforms to the way life actually works. So when we're in conformity with the way life actually works, suffering recedes. There's more happiness, more peace, more sense of benevolence. When our views are wrong, it means we're viewing the world contrary to the way the world really works, and therefore it produces conflict, and therefore less happiness and more suffering. And so we, in the Buddhist teaching, we know we have things like the 5 points of mundane right view. And then we have also the supramundane wisdom. So the wisdom of ultimates, of aggregates, of transience, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, and so forth. And so we pick up the practices. For instance, what about loving kindness? Loving kindness is a thinking process. We do it on the basis of the view that it's a worthwhile endeavor because it may very well produce pleasant results for us. And so we practice it and we find out directly whether that's the case. So our views are straightened because we find that indeed they are productive of pleasant results, practicing loving kindness. Equally, we could do it with the material world, becoming more generous and being of service to others. We find that that produces very pleasant results. So there's the process of reflection on our experience, and that leads to a ever more a greater correction of our view structure, which then leads to the performance of more actions that conform with those view structures, and we experience more pleasant results, and we find that our lives are more and more coming into a harmonious relationship with the way the world really works. Is this helping? It's all a bit vague, Joe, because your question was a bit vague. Is it helping?
Sorry. Yes, it is. So would it be correct to say something like right view is more about your view of the practice and to get yourself to actually sit down and practice, whereas right understanding is understanding what you see during your practice. Would that be correct to say?
No, I'm not sure what you mean by right understanding. There's right view and right thought.
Okay. So maybe it's clear comprehension is what I'm thinking of then.
Okay, so in the actual practice itself, you have mindfulness. Mindfulness is the choiceless awareness of what presents itself in meditation. Clear comprehension. So mindful. So all right. So there's another stage. There's the actual noting to the best of our ability of whatever it is that's arisen in that moment and presented itself. And then the clear comprehension is the clear recognition of what it is, including the burgeoning recognition of its characteristics. So initially, when we meditate, so I'm about to sneeze. See if I can stop it. There we go. So initially, as mindful noting develops, we're able to recognize, oh, there's a bird singing in the garden, or whatever it happens to be. Let's say it's a bird singing in the garden, and then so there's clear comprehension that there's a bird singing in the garden, right? But as we develop, we're able to then mindfully note that there is a sound and that there is a perception, bird singing, and that the two are not the same. The sound is not the perception is not the sound, and then there is also hearing, which is the consciousness of the sound, but the hearing is not the sound, and the hearing is not the perception. And you start to tease out details and see in those details that none of those components are permanent. They're all impermanent, and so there is a burgeoning clear comprehension of what it is that the choiceless awareness is showing us.
Gotcha.
That
absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, great. Glad you made it home okay.
Thanks.
That's a these terms, they're both precise and very wide at the same time. Like it's a perfectly legitimate, clear comprehension to know, for instance, that loving kindness produces very pleasant results. If you practice it regularly, it can actually change the way that you perceive the world. So I think clear comprehension is a very broad term that can be used in very specific ways as well. So if that's what we mean by right understanding, okay.
Gotcha.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it was nice hearing from Joe. Is there anyone else we don't normally hear from? Anyone fancy popping in a question or an observation? Claire, hello.
I think that it can be absolutely terrifying to be just sitting with your thoughts, and my mind will try every trick in the book to stop me from doing it. It's not always like that.
What
And
what is what is the objection?
It's not always it's not always like that. It can be very releasing. It can be amazing, you know. I know there's something good and beneficial going on.
So what does that tell us?
It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, but what does that tell us in regard to the fear that you spoke of?
There's transient.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
But,
the more we're willing to acknowledge that the fear is transient, it is a response. There's some objection going on. There is, there's resistance there. There's some objection in some aspects. Okay, but that might not be immediately obvious what that is. However, if there is a willingness to concede that the fear itself is transient, the thoughts are transient, every component part of what we look at is transient, then that we haven't solved the problem of the fear. But what we've done is included it in the practice. And so when fear arises, we can experience the fear without seeking its resolution.
Yes.
And that deepens the awareness that it is indeed transient, to the point where anxieties, fears, worries, and concerns are allowed the freedom to arise because they're not being identified with. The part can never, this is an interesting point, the part can never define the whole. And what the mind tries to do is to convince us that its narrative and the feelings that come with it are defining the whole of the reality. But they are only parts of the reality. They are only components, the feeling component, the resistance component. And the more we recognize that, the more we recognize that they do not define reality. That means we don't have to identify with them, which means they can be allowed the total freedom to arise because we know what they are and we can just be with those clearly, definitely, really uncomfortable feelings at some points, but we recognize that they're transient and they don't define the actual reality of the situation. The fear is telling you there is definitely something really badly gone awry here. But in actual fact, it's only just its function is just to tell us just to take care, be alert. That's why it's uncomfortable, because we're far more likely to be alert, and we're learning to just include these components and recognize that they don't define the whole.
Yes. And I was reflecting on something I read a while ago or heard about, which was of an experiment where people were put in a room with nothing to do, but they could electrocute themselves.
Not bliss.
I think I told you. And in the end, people were so intolerant or unable to be with themselves, they actually chose to electrocute themselves. Which,
well, they're not meditators.
Exactly. So, we can give ourselves pats on the back that we are here, even thinking about meditating.
Oh, you've given me such brilliant ideas for retreats.
Well, but people, we're running, aren't we? People run all the time from themselves.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be that way. And it just see, because for me, being left alone in a room is by myself, that's a blissful idea.
Yeah. No, I feel like, yes, of course, I don't feel like, well, yeah, it can be lovely.
It's because people are at odds with their own existence.
Yeah.
They haven't realized how magnificent it is that any of this is actually happening. It is quite extraordinary. And the more I practice the absorption side, and I get deeper and deeper in, just deeper and deeper into the moment, just the more fabulous it becomes. I mean, with the insight training as well, in combination, it's just extraordinary. In the Sufi tradition, they say that the highest form of realization is awe. And more, that's just what you're left with. And it's not awe because it's just the most amazing, even though last night I saw an amazing sunset. It's not just because you're presented with this momentous sort of thing. It's just like the awe of the ordinary. Just the sheer fact that there is something rather than nothing is extraordinary. But everyone is fast asleep. And they're so at odds with existence because they see existence as so threatening because they've got this sense of themselves as separate from it. It is entirely threatening because that self-image, that idea of self, that view of self needs constant support. And so in that situation that you talk about, in that, not, in a sense, electrocuting themselves is just their way of just reassuring themselves that they exist. Weirdly, it's just reinforcing the sense of I am. But it just leads to this perpetual ignoring of the extraordinary, which is right here all the time. This is extraordinary that any of this is happening. But people are so numb to it. They've lost the sense of mystery. They've lost the sense of awe in life. So you've got two options available to you in that situation. You can either electrocute yourself or you can cultivate loving attention. Even sitting in a room by yourself, there is plenty going on. But it requires work. It requires the willingness to keep on practicing. Yeah, so under review, I've decided not to put electrical equipment in people's cells on retreats so that they can electrocute themselves if they get a bit bored. In hindsight, I think I probably against regulations, so I probably wouldn't get away with that.
Okay.
Does that help?
Good to know. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, we're going down that route. But overall, do you think that that's helped you with your understanding a little bit?
Yes, yeah, no, I was just a reflection to, it's to note what we all do, really. Just even thinking about it and trying it.
It's that willingness to, yes. And when you're in the practice, it's that willingness to include the boredom, to include the fear, to include those as extraordinarily valuable objects to allow to be there, to watch. I know it's difficult. That's why we do need guidance. We do need help, reassurance. As I like to say, I'm not asking anyone to do anything I haven't done. But you can become the master of those responses. And in mastering them, they're allowed to come and go as they want. And because they require constant resistance, they require resistance for their existence, the more you just accept them, the less often they appear. It's so paradoxical, but the more you accept suffering, the more you accept it, the more you allow it, the less it appears.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Joe, another question.
Yeah, it just made me think of something. So sometimes during meditation, it seems like, especially with the bad feelings and everything that pop up, it seems like they don't disappear. They don't have transients. It just seems that way. And I wanted to ask, is it because I keep kind of recreating them because I keep grasping at them as being me or mine? Is that why it seems like they're not transient, even though obviously they are?
Yeah, if I could give another example to try to put it across, definitely the grasping after them, the resistance to them is a form of grasping, and that does recreate similar iterations, most definitely.
Okay.
But if I can go back to like the analogy of the bird singing in the garden, it's like initially there's just this one thing going on, which is the bird singing in the garden, and we know that the bird singing will eventually end. The experience will eventually end, but it's just one thing. It's just bird singing in the garden, right? And then as your insight into transience and the nature of the components that go to make up an experience, as that becomes more detailed, more subtle, as your mindfulness strengthens, as your focus develops, you start to see more, you pierce through the concept of birds singing in the garden, you pierce through that sort of like singular concept, and you look more deeply at what's actually going on, and you realize there's this whole series of sounds. It's not just one thing going on. There's a multitude of things going on, all arising in series, arising and passing away, arising and passing away. The experience hasn't changed. It's just that your insight wisdom, your mindfulness, your focus has all improved enough that you can pierce through that concept and see that there is a whole sort of shimmering set of discrete occasions of that thing actually taking place. And it's absolutely the case with everything, because nothing has that solidity that the perception asserts. The perception asserts there is a solid thing there, dog. The word dog does not imply transience at all in any way, shape, or form. So it's got this sense of permanency about it. Bird singing in the garden doesn't indicate transience. And so even with these more subtle mental states, they appear to hang around, but only because we haven't got the sufficient mindfulness, focus, and insight wisdom to see that there's a whole string of discrete moments of experience arising and passing away, even in a mental quality like doubt or anxiety or irritation or frustration. There are a multitude of things arising and passing away, and it's just hanging on in there, Joe, hanging on in there and continuing to practice, and gradually the mindfulness, the focus, and the insight strengthens sufficiently that you start to see that.
So would it be correct to say that faith is what carries you through until you have that developed insight to be able to see?
Faith, the willingness to include doubt as a mental object, to include it in the practice.
Gotcha.
Also, a lack of a viable alternative. That helps tremendously too. And yeah, just the willingness to persevere, to endure, to go through whatever it is that you have to go through. Big waves at the beginning, the waves die down as you go along. And yeah, the insight starts to take over. But yeah, you do need faith.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Very helpful.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, thank you. Such a clear signal from Phoenix, Arizona. Amazing. And a clear signal from Canada too, Alan.
Yeah, North America is in the house.
Yay.
Yay. Hi. Joe, thank you for that question. It reminds me of something I was pondering, where for me it would be negative stories or remembering something that's unpleasant that I have to deal with. And like Joe said, it hangs around and I do acknowledge it and it fades and it although it's not the same one, I realize it comes back again. So I'll be chewing over the same, I will be reaching out and giving energy to the same item over a period of time, during a session. What's clinging? Like craving. And then I thought, is that clinging? Like, can you talk a bit about clinging and how it relates to this particular continuing to give energy to an object?
Why are we continuing to give energy to the object?
Well, because I don't want it to be there. I don't like it.
Yeah. So there's an initial rejection of that experience. In order to reject the experience, you have to at least think about that experience.
Okay.
And so that's when it becomes clinging. So there's the rejection. So there's the contact. So that might be a thought. There's the unpleasant feeling. There's the initial aversion. And then in order to be adverse to it, there has to be the consideration of the thing again, which causes another painful feeling, which causes another rejection. And so you could say clinging is just like it's like the
strings it out.
multiplicity of iterations of the craving. It's like fractals. It's like the same pattern, but just expanded. Okay. Many patterns, okay. all then creating another pattern. It also includes the justification for the objection. So there's an objection to reality, and then there's a justification for objection to reality. That's clinging.
Okay, that's a good one. All right, I like that. All right. Okay, so the clinging is playing a role as an objection. It carries an objection. I keep feeding into it, and it carries on and has a life, and I haven't yet gotten to the point of, oh, acceptance. There you are. But it's not related to the fact that you haven't seen it quite properly.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. It's just that you haven't seen it quite properly. It's like once you see it really, when mindfulness and clear noting of it, there's like, oh, why would I do that? Yeah.
Right. But clinging is not playing a role in the fact that the reaction or the memory, the conditioned thing comes up again, and I start playing with it again. That's not about clinging. Clinging has to do with after it comes up and it continues.
Well, no, I mean it's the multiplicity of iterations. So, like I say, in order, the memory comes up, the unpleasant feeling arises. And there's like, oh, I don't like that. But in the act of going, I don't like that, there's the seed of the thought about the thing. So it causes another painful feeling. And you think, well, I don't like that. It shouldn't be there. And you're already building on it. And so it's many iterations going again and again and again. And we call those many iterations the clinging.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And that leads to, the development of condemnations and justifications and the setting of rules about how this should be and that should. Oh, you recognize that? Okay. and so then eventually that becomes becoming. Okay, this is what we're going to have to do about this. Yeah, all the problem solving.
I get there right away. Oh yeah.
All the attempts at finding solutions to the problem. Oh, yeah. That's all part of clinging, which then becomes becoming, which then becomes new, fresh action, the birth of something new.
Okay. All right. I know that was a bit technical, but thank you. Okay. I was wondering about that.
That was a great question. I'm glad we were able to clarify it. And that is our lot for this evening. So I've got a few messages. Joe says, dependent origination over and over because we're clinging to it and making the bad feeling keep being reborn over and over, it seems. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. Exactly. So there's a little rebirth of the problem again, arising again and again because we keep playing with it, because we keep fighting with it and fussing and willing it to be this way or that way, or rather than just what we're learning to do, or what you're learning to do gradually over time, which is to stop solving, to allow that thing to be there unresolved. So if it's a memory of something unpleasant from the past, we can acknowledge that, oh, I'm experiencing a result of past actions. This is the memory. This is the painful feeling. This is the strong urge to make it different, but I'm not going to act on that urge. I'm going to learn to leave it unsolved. And it's that learning to leave it unsolved which allows you to see that it's transient. Seeing that it's transient reinforces the knowledge I don't have to do anything with it. I just have to re-experience it because it's my karma to re-experience this now. And that means I can allow it to arise, to be what it wants to be, to express itself, and then it passes away unsolved. That means that we haven't clung to it. Okay, I make it sound easy, but I appreciate that it's a very messy business. But look, you've got a few weeks now to work on it. I hope some of you can make it to our open day on the 22nd of June. Other than that, we'll be sending out the newsletter in August, and we'll all pick up again in July, August. Yeah, we'll pick up again in August. So thank you all for your contributions and for being here, and I wish you a very happy summer. I'm definitely going to have a very interesting summer.
Yes. Thank you, Paul and Lucy.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank
Paul.
you. Thank you so much,
you.
Paul.
Yeah, have a good summer.
Thank you. See you again soon.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.